So capturing the effect of light. So I've been teaching for a long time, and I could judged a few shows. And what I find a lot is that people are afraid of the darks. And you to make the lights pop, you have to have dark or grays. So I'm just showing some examples here. This is a John Singer Sargent painting. I saw this painting at the DuPont in Delaware like years ago, and I was like, oh my God, like it just like glows and it sings. And it only works because it's so dark all around everything that the red lights and the woman and anything that's light really pops. And his background is really dark. So I use that as an example. And here's another one that he did that it's kind of an unusual design with that big circle of light on the left. And his figures are very dark. So this is just more about light. And I think it's a beautiful painting. It might be a watercolor, I'm not even sure, but I like that one. And then here's another one where if you squint at that, everything is very dark and blue, even in the woman and the child in the background, because it's all about the sculptures. And if you look at this one over here, see, I'm going to make a pointer, highlighter, laser pointer. There we go. If you look at this right here, that's like a design thing that's really cool because this light shoots your eye down to this person and she's looking down this way. So, I mean, he was a master, and I think this is a watercolor too. But if you squint at it, the whole almost probably more than 3/4 of it is very dark. Not super dark, but a darker value. So don't be afraid of the darks. And this is an example that, remember, value does all the work, but color gets all the credit. So if the colors were really great and the values were bad, it wouldn't really be a successful painting. So don't be afraid of the darks. And see that it's like a pale yellow color, how that really pops right now. This is the same pale yellow color, but with all the other colors around it that are similar values, it doesn't really stand out much at all. So you need contrast to create a scene full of light. So just, that's mostly what this class is about, like creating more of a contrast. And here's a painting. Michael recognized this one. This was my demo painting at the Booth Museum in October. And see how dark it is underneath the awnings. This is in Paris. It's very dark under there. A lot of the stuff, all the people in that under the dark awnings, it's all very dark and obscure, but none of that really matters because it's all about the light streaming in on the right-hand side from the distant, just the distant buildings, and everything gets light as it goes back. So this painting wouldn't be as successful if it wasn't so dark. And I go on and on today. I'll go on a lot about having a good photograph if you're painting from a photo. But in this case, I had a really bad photograph. It was a much bigger painting that I cropped in, but I kind of like that. And that's another way to trick yourself into being more impressionistic. If you have a painting that's kind of blurry, like this one, you can't even see what's underneath that awning. It makes you not paint all the details. So you want to have a photo with strong light, but sometimes it's good to have one that's kind of blurry because you can't paint what you can't see. And then you don't get obsessed with the details, because successful paintings are all about what you left out rather than putting in all the details. So that makes sense, because it's really important to get a photo with strong light, unless you're painting outside, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. That's a whole different thing, but a photo that has good light, and it's really, really hard to get a good photo. I mean, I go through thousands of photographs just to find one that I like. And this one I liked because it was, I knew that I could punch up that red and do whatever I wanted to with it. And I also punched up the greenish blue in the background over here because it's the contrast of these two that make that work. Okay, so this is the first painting that I'm going to do a demo of. So having a good photograph is half of the story. Like I just said, I take thousands of photographs. So when you see the photo, like when I took this picture and looked at it, this was on there's a little town north of Taos, New Mexico called Arroyo Seco or Seco. I'm not sure if I'm even saying it right. But when I took this picture, I was like, oh, wow, I really like that picture. And I knew that someday it was going to be a painting. So this was my friend walking over to the right, a fellow artist, Teresa Vito. And I could have put her in, but for this class, I decided it's not about figures. It's more about sunlight. So see how this light draws your eye right over to here and the door. And that's kind of where I want you to look, is the entrance. I took out this big cross in my painting because it's kind of cool, but it doesn't help. I didn't think it helped the composition, kind of like blocks it. And you'll see as I do the painting that I kind of punched up these flower pots at the very end to make that be more of the focal point. So before I did this painting, oops, well, this is the next one. So this is the set. So I do the first one of the church, I do the whole painting and show you every step of the way. And then this one, this was kind of like a bonus. When it snowed, I walked around the block and I was like, oh my God, like I want to paint that strong light coming across there. So this one today, I'll just show you, but in like fast speed, so you won't fall asleep, but you still get the idea of how I did it. But it has strong light and just a few simple shapes. Like when you squint, it's just kind of obvious where the sunlight is. So I'll show you that one too. And then this is back to the church. So I did a value study. And I know everybody hates to do value studies. I don't like doing them either because I just want to paint. You know, that's the problem. We all just want to paint. But this is such a good thing to do. It's like your roadmap. So when you do, so this is on a index card. So it's 4 by 6 inch piece of paper. So the drawing might be 2 inches by 3 inches or something like that. It's really little. But because it's little, it forces me to really simplify the shape. So I did this with a marker, but you can also use a pencil if you're good at, you know, I would use a soft pencil and then you can shade and blur with your finger or something to get the different values. And it's super simple. Like this could take like 5 to 10 minutes, but it just, what it does is it makes you plan it instead of just like nilly-willy starting to paint something and then you realize the church is too low or the church is too high, but you paint it anyway because you had a good drawing. So I just think they're really important. And once I started making these, my paintings got a lot better. And then this is the one for the second painting. So if you do one of these, you'll have a much better chance of doing a good painting and you won't have to rework it. You'll get it right the first time, like the placement and everything. And this is in proportion to an 8 by 10 inch canvas. And then also, this is a demo I did, I don't know, a year or two ago. And I bought sunflowers, I put them in my window and I couldn't, this was in my dining room. This was before I had a studio. I couldn't really paint in my dining room. So I painted from the photograph of it, but having a good photograph made such a difference. And then this was the painting that I did, which now that I'm looking at, of course, I'm thinking, oh, I should have done this and that, but you get the idea. Like you have a much better chance. Like strong backlighting is really something that I love to paint too. And I have an online class of this. If you're one of my mentors, you can just let me know and you can watch that one. And then this was a plein air painting. This is a pretty famous restaurant in downtown Santa Fe, Cafe Pasquale's. And I went there like a bunch of times this summer. And I noticed that at a certain time of day, there were these strong shadows coming across. Other times of the day, it was just flat. So I went there at that time of day so I could get these strong shadows because that diagonal brings you down to these people. And then these shadows bring you over to the people. And I did most of the painting there, except as is typical in Santa Fe, it had a clear blue sky. So when I came back, I went through all my cloud photos and I added the clouds because it just looked kind of boring with the blue sky. So, but it was the strong sunlight, I believe, that makes it a more successful painting. And then this was a plein air painting I did in Los Luceros, which is up a little bit north of Santa Fe. And I went there with a good friend. And when I got there, it didn't look like this. I'll show you how it looked. But I did a little value study of what I wanted it to look like. When we got there, the whole building was in shadow. So I did this value study of what I wanted it to look like because I knew the sun was going to come over and shine on the front at some point. But like I said, it's just a 4 by 6 inch index card with pencil or marker. And it's basically to show you the placement of the building and the shadows, because it's the shadows what, in my painting world, what makes the painting. That's one of the reasons I moved to Santa Fe, because the sun is always out. So now I start them differently. This one, I actually did these on like box panels, and I put an acrylic, like yellow ochre with a little red wash underneath it. And then when I go out and paint, it's already there. So that's one of the ways I start paintings, and I'll show you a different way later. And then I started doing brushwork with mostly transparent oxide red. Sometimes I put a little ultramarine in with it. So I just started drawing that. And for some reason, I was really struggling with the shape of the building. It's so simple, but I did. And then I reworked it, moved, kind of put some shadows in. And there you can see it at the point where there was no sunlight on the front of the building. And then I just started adding some of the greens. So a lot of times I'll draw in the painting. This is my process. I'll draw in the painting. It's a transparent oxide red and a little bit of ultramarine or iridium if it needs darker spots. And start adding the tree colors, because a lot of times I don't know where to start. And I usually do from kind of from top to bottom so that my fingers don't get in the way when I'm putting details in. But I just started blocking in the colors. Then I started putting more colors in, and then the sun was starting to go across the front here. So I thought, oh, that'll be cool. But no details really, just blocking in the colors. And then the sun started streaming across the front of the building, but I wasn't really happy with the way that looked. But I continued adding the color and these trees. I liked the way it was dark here and then light. These were like aspen trees, I guess. And these shadows bring your eye over to here. And then these shadows bring your eye over here. And then so this is what it looked like when I left there. So when I came home and the paint was still really wet, I scraped off the whole front and I made it look more sunlit. And I added, there was a cross there and a path back here. So at home, I added some of the details and these little lit up colors of leaves. So, I mean, I used to, when I did a lot of plein air competitions, you had to do it all like right there and then hand it in. But I love not doing the competitions, because look at the difference. I could have been done there, and now I made it like sing when I got home. I just punched up the color. That was probably a bad photograph. Might have been brighter, but I think it's more successful like that. And then this, so if you do a painting and you're having problems with it, just take a picture on your phone and put it in grayscale. And if the colors, like it still looks sunlit even without any color. So that kind of proves the point that it's the values that make it work. And don't be afraid of the darks. I keep saying that because I could say that 1,000 times, I think. But you get the point there. And then this is another plein air painting I did when the leaves were super golden. This is this building I just love. The Sequia Madre is a road near Canyon Road in Santa Fe. And what it means in Spanish is mother ditch. So there's a ditch that runs over here that people get their water from that ditch. So anyway, I love that photograph. And I went there and set up one day. And that just kind of shows you how the photograph worked. And you can do that too. When you take a photograph, put it in grayscale and see if it has strong light. And that'll help you decide if it's a good photo to paint from or not. And then I did this value study just to kind of show the placement and the shadows. The drawing's a little wonky on the wall, but still gave me the idea. And then I have this DV, DH, DD. And if you've taken any of my classes, you've heard what that means. But that's kind of the dominant vertical is this door. The dominant horizontal is just kind of the ground. And then the diagonal is this sidewalk that's going to bring your eye back to the door. So even though my focal point, if it's the door, is smack in the middle, but rules are made to be broken, right? That's what I say. So anyway, that was my value study. And then this was a few that I remembered to take while I was there. That one I also did with an acrylic background of yellow, ochre, and red. And then I started drawing with transparent oxide red. And you can see the difference. Like this lighter color is just transparent oxide red right out of the tube. And the darker color is where I might have added a little bit of ultramarine or viridian. I usually pick one of those. I think I used viridian that time. So then I put in some of the darker darks. Always put your darks in first because you want your darks to be thinner and more transparent colors for the darks because they kind of go back in space. And then here I started adding some of the sky and the greens. And I also started putting some of the Adobe color on. And then I used my knife for the walls. And I just kept going. And this one was how it looked when I put it away and back into my backpack. And it was okay, but I knew it needed some stronger things. I can only really plein air paint for like an hour and a half. Then I have to go to the bathroom or getting cold. So I didn't plan on finishing it, but that's how far I got when I was outside. And then when I brought it home, what I did was, see the wall it looks sunlit, but it's not super sunlit. So then what I do is I go over it with a lighter color and my knife and kind of blend it in. And that kind of helped it sing. And I go, what else did I do? Just added some more details here. Put a shadow across the door because there was some tree shadows there, which actually when I go back, I might even glaze over a shadow here because that doesn't make any sense. I just realized for a shadow to be here, there has to be one there. So anyway, remember that it's always easier to make things lighter. So if you're painting and your painting looks kind of dark and dull, just remember that it's a lot easier to make things lighter than to make them darker. Because if you start putting darks on top of lights, it just gets chalky. You don't ever get a rich dark like you could have had if you kept it darker and thinner with more of the transparent colors. So the trees don't have a lot of paint in them. They're kind of thin, but I wanted them to remain dark. And in general, you want your lighter passages to be thicker paint because that's what you want people to look at. So if it's thicker and it's has more dimension, that's where people look. The darker ones, you want thinner and transparent because if you make the darks really thick, what happens is the thickness of the paint picks up highlights from all around you and it ends up making them look lighter rather than darker. And then here I put it in grayscale and it still looks sunlit, even though it has like no color. So once again, don't be afraid of the darks. And then this was one of the hardest paintings I think I did. I was with Jane and it's just ruins, which I realize now they're very hard to paint south of here. And but it was very sunlit. So this is a different way that I started painting. And this is usually how I typically paint outside and in my studio. I start with a white canvas, then I put a wash on of either transparent oxide red or yellow ochre, usually transparent oxide red. And then I wipe out with paper towel what is going to be sunlit. So here I just, put in the wash and then I wiped out with the paper towel what was going to be sunlit. And this is on a Centurion linen acrylic primed canvas. So then after I wipe out those areas, then I put in the darks, and that's with transparent oxide red. And I also put in a little bit of blue for the mountains, and I exaggerated them. I made them bigger because I wanted them to look bigger, and I'm going to make the trees look more golden because we're artists. We can exaggerate things. And then here I added some of the greens in the background. And here I was painting in the shade and I was adding really thick colors. And then I usually turn it into the sun at some point and then it looks horrible because all that paint is creating all these shadows and it gets really distracting. So I like thick paint, but sometimes it doesn't belong everywhere. In general, I don't put thick paint in the sky because it's more distance and I don't want it to like jump out at you. So then what I did after that was kind of even out. I took my knife here where all those bumps were and kind of evened it out a little bit. And then I used my knife and some brushes in the bottom here to draw your eye up. And these fences were way over to the left, but I kind of liked them there. So I added them. So you have to be a little creative. I also simplified the building because it was just too much going on. But that was just a little 8x10. And there it is in black and white, and it still looks sunlit, you know. So then this is a painting I did 18x24 for a demo in the spring that I did here in Santa Fe. So I do start with the grid, and you can use any kind of grid, even if you just do it in thirds and put diagonals across it. It really helps you draw it. So besides the fact that it helps me design, it helps me draw it from a photograph if I'm using a photo. And this was a in-studio demo. But I did the transparent oxide red, and then it was a night scene. So I used ultramarine blue and a little bit of transparent oxide red just to draw in the shape. This is a theater, performing arts center downtown Santa Fe. And I took a picture one time that I loved of it, and I just had to paint it. So then it was kind of like a night scene. So I added the sky next. But see how the yellow underneath is already glowing just because of the dark around it. And then over here. So I add the sky and blues using a brush. And then I added more colors and more details and more people. And the highlights. So a lot of times, either like when I do figures, they're either backlit or they have some kind of light on them that I just like. One of my favorite things, they have halos. So I'm painting all these little angels, halos from the backlighting. And that's what kind of creates a glowing focal point. So you can see it up a little closer. Like these people don't have a lot of detail in them, but it doesn't really matter because as long as you have a few of them, like these silhouettes are really good. So they're, as a design thing, they're drawing you into the other people. And then of course you're going to know they're people because even if they're kind of grotesque or not have a lot of details. But notice also how all their heads line up. It's something I teach in all my classes. If you're standing and they're standing within, you know, like this woman was probably shorter, but their heads always line up. But what makes the lighting work here is that this was glowing. This was glowing. This awning shoots your eye down to these people. So this one doesn't really have a focal point, but it's all about the people and the conversations and all the stuff that's going on here. And there's not a lot of detail up here. I mean, it's a beautiful building with all kinds of ornate stuff, but I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be about just the color and the people. And there it is in black and white, and it still shows light. It still looks like lit from the awning or the whatever that thing is called, the marquee. Okay, so this is what today's demo is going to be. This is the church. There was the value study, to go over it again. And this was the underpainting, which you'll watch me do in quick time. So for this one, it was a white linen panel, 8x10, Centurion linen, which is my favorite. If you use Cobra oil paint, you have to use acrylic primed canvases because the oil primed ones, the water and the oil don't mix when you do the first layer. But for this one, I put a wash on of transparent oxide red and then I wiped it out. And you'll see that in my demo. And then this was the second demo painting I do today. That was the photo. And I'll just tell you about my paint quick, and then we'll go right into the video. So I use Cobra, but it doesn't really matter what you use. Cobra is made by Royal Talons, and they also make Rembrandt. So if I have a lot of Rembrandt and Cobra, so if I run out of like red and Cobra, I can use it with oil or any traditional oil paint. And down here, I said Cobra can be mixed with traditional oils at a ratio of 1/3 Cobra to 2/3, like 1/3 traditional to 2/3 Cobra, but they've changed it now. They say you can use half and half. So anyway, it's okay to mix them. The only thing, if you mix too much traditional paint with Cobra, the only difference is you won't be able to wash your brushes with water. And this is how I set up my palette. Generally, I put the transparent oxide red down here because it's a transparent color and it's thinner and it disappears like really fast. And I don't use it throughout the painting. It's mostly for the underpainting. And then primary cyan is kind of like cerulean, but it's much more reasonably priced. So I love that. It's really good for a sky color to start. I have cobalt blue on here, but I pretty much don't use it because I've been using ultramarine. But I'm going to try cobalt again and see what the difference is. But today I'm not using cobalt. Ultramarine blue, permanent green deep, which is the same color as Viridian, but Cobra just calls it something else. And then Madder Lake is the same as alizarin. Same thing, Cobra just calls it something different. And then primary magenta, I love for like pink colors and bright colors because Madder Lake and alizarin are kind of dull colors. So primary magenta, cad red light, cadmium orange. That's cadmium yellow deep. I don't get cadmium medium. I don't know. It just seems like if I want medium, I will add the deep to the cadmium yellow or cadmium lemon. And then yellow and white. So it doesn't matter how you lay out your palette, as long as you lay it out the same way every day so you know where your colors are. And then this is my favorite panel is Centurion Linen or stretched Centurion Linen. And I always use the LX, which is universal or acrylic prime. The DLX is oil prime. So if you paint traditional oils, you can use that one. And then Centurion Linen also makes a linen canvas pad. So if you're just starting out or you want to practice and you don't want a bunch of heavy panels laying around, those are good. And then the multimedia art boards, those are really cool. They're very light and you can mount them. So when I go to Europe, I take these because they're super lightweight, because you get a bunch of these in your suitcase, they end up weighing a lot. So these are nice and I use them for traveling. And then this is my favorite knife. It's called a Flick RGM Italy number 30. And it's really hard to find on their website. So if you're trying to find one and you can't, send me an email and I'll send you the link because it's like impossible to find. But you really only have to buy one or two and then you'll have them the rest of your life unless you lose them or bent them. And then this one down here, I use that sometimes on bigger paintings, but not that much anymore. And I also use giant paint scrapers sometimes when I'm doing bigger paintings. But in general, I use the same one. And even though it's about 2 or 3 inches long, I'll show you today how to make it be a smaller knife. And this is our Bavati scraper, which is just kind of a fun thing I use. And you'll see me use it maybe once today, but it's a rubberized thing that kind of removes paint when you want to get some paint out of your way that didn't belong there, or to create effects too. It works. And then these are my watercolor riggers or liners that I use. I use those for the highlights on people's heads, and I'll use them in this demo for some of the trees. So I don't like oil painting thin brushes because they're usually really short and stubby and they just dig in and mush, where these lay thick paint on top of your painting. And that's the end of the slideshow. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I know that was a lot and I went really fast, but I wanted to get it in. So any questions? If you do, just unmute yourself.
Michelle, this is Courtney. I was just missed what you were saying about, do you have to use acrylic or universal primed if you're going to start with the water mixables?
Yes, because when I started using water mixables in 2009 or something, it was a long time ago. and I had oil primed canvases and I didn't know any better. So I did a couple paintings. And when I got home, it started like cracking a little bit. So what happens if you use a oil primed canvas or linen with Cobra and you use no water, it's okay. But if you're going to use water as your underpainting, it doesn't, it's kind of like oil and water don't mix. So it just doesn't work if you're going to use a water wash. So you have to use universal or acrylic prime panels if you're going to use like a water wash and paint. Like I use a water wash to start and then I paint with thick paint. But the water wash might crack. I mean, I think it's unusual, but it's just something to watch out for. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking because Kathy, when I took that class with Kathy Anderson, she was saying you had to use oil primed, I think, to do her wipeout method. But I think with universal primed, you can still wipe out the oils just fine, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, definitely. It's so you use traditional oils?
Well, I did there when I was with
Okay.
her. Yeah, but I think she liked that oil prime just to totally be able to wipe out maybe, but yeah.
She just really likes, she's a good friend, and she just really likes oil prime canvases.
Okay,
So
just okay.
I mean that some people love it and I haven't really found the difference. So I don't, it doesn't bother me. So,
Okay,
but I like the Centurion linen is my favorite acrylic prime because with the water you can just wipe it right out really easily.
cool. Okay, thank you.
You're
Michelle,
welcome.
if
Yes.
you start mixing traditional oil into your Cobra water mixable oils, is there a point beyond which you should switch from using water as your solvent to using oil solvent?
I don't think so. The only thing I've done that I've noticed already is when I'm doing my wash underneath, I'll like absentmindedly use traditional paint and then it just doesn't work, you know. But as far as switching, once I'm into the painting, I mean, I don't really use any water once I start painting thick anyway, but no, I think you can just keep using water. Yeah. In fact, I
Keep
know you
using
can.
water no matter how much.
Yeah,
Thanks.
because I have Gamsol in my cupboard and I'm like really weird now. When I get it out to like clean something, I like do it outside, wear gloves. So I know it's not that toxic, but in my mind it is.
Michelle, I
Thank
found a
you.
trick for cleaning your brushes. If you either put too much traditional into your Cobra, or if you're using all traditional, what you can do is wipe the paint out of the brush, and then take one dip in your water mixable medium, and work that in, and then you can wash it out with water.
Okay.
You
Well,
don't
that's
have
good.
to have the medium makes the traditional water mixable, so that makes it real easy to clean your brushes with water.
Yeah, and I also use Murphy's oil soap. Like if I'm a really lazy, sloppy cleanup person, so sometimes I'll just go to bed and leave all my brushes lay out, and then I can just let them soak in Murphy's oil soap for like an hour and clean them, and they're fine. So,
I've restored brushes that had completely dried out, even some acrylics that had accidentally put them away, and several months later, I found them, and I would use the Murphys to restore them. So it really works well too.
Yeah, no, I love that stuff. I have a gallon of it. So Jan asked if I'm going to share my slides. This whole thing will be recorded and hopefully up on YouTube tomorrow. So you can watch it, you know, zoom ahead and you can get all the information. And yes, I'm using all Cobra paints for my demo. Any other questions?
I put one more in the chat. Michelle, I was just wondering when you use those canvas pads, do you use those when you're traveling and then like tape them to a board or something?
You know, I haven't, but as I was telling you about them just now, I thought, gee, I should take them to Europe with me because I used to actually do that. And because last time I went to Europe, I had so many paintings and I had them like in a shopping bag and brought them with me on the plane. But I think that years ago, that's what I did to answer your question. Yes, but I kind of forgot that because I do like the linen, Centurion linen better than the multimedia boards. the multimedia boards, you can't really put a wash on and wipe out so well. It kind of just like goes in there. So yeah, I would get some of that and experiment with it. Yeah, you can tape it to a board, and then problem is to have it dry. That's always the issue.
Do you just stick like
But
wax paper in between them to travel?
I've done that, but another thing I started using, which I only use outside, is called oleo pasto. And it's made by Winsor Newton, I think. It's like this stinky gel. And if I just add it to my white paint, it makes it dry like in a day or two. So when I went to Europe last time, I used that stuff. And I don't like to use it in my house because it's really strong and stinky, and it's probably very toxic. Okay, Jan wants to know if I varnish my paintings. Yeah, that's a very good question, Jan. A lot of times I don't because I sell them and they take so long to dry. But when I do, sometimes I use Soluvar, which is something you paint on any kind of oil paintings. And sometimes I use spray Kmar varnish just to give it a protective coat. And it's always, I think that's varnish is an issue that no one really knows the answer to. But I do try to varnish them if they're dry enough. Yes. And I can send you an email to the Kmar varnish, which you can buy at any art store. It's more like a retouch varnish, but it works. So, any other questions? If not, I'm going to start the video. You can still ask questions when I start that too. Okay, now. Okay, I'm not sure. Oh, I think I know what I'm doing wrong here. So close that. This video is super big file, so it might take a minute to open it, but it shouldn't. Well, while we're waiting, any other questions? I don't know why this is taking so long. Now it's doing something. Yes, so this whole thing will be recorded and on YouTube. The problem, if it's not there tomorrow, it'll be there Monday. It sometimes, because it's such a huge file, takes really, really long to download it to YouTube. It's kind of frustrating that it's not just opening up.
Did we ever convince you to come do a workshop in California? It's really nice here.
Oh, I know it is. I was just, so one of my mentorees is Eileen Silver, and she lives near, where does she live near? She lives near San Francisco somewhere. She was saying the same thing, that whatever art league is near her, they don't really have any success having workshop people come. She wanted to, I guess she wants me to come too, but.
Maybe we could combine forces because we've got a fairly good plein air painting group, and John McDonald came, and they actually
okay.
Little Beach House as their home base, and it was terrific.
Yeah. No, I would love to come to California. I was there last year for the Balboa Island, but that's way south of you. So
yeah.
Oh, I'm really disappointed this is not opening right away. I'm just trying to see if I can open the app first. Tell you, these technical things are really frustrating. It's a 6 GB file. Okay. I think maybe I found it. All right, I think we're ready now. So can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
You see the value study? Okay. All right. So I showed the wrong value study. Actually, I should have shown the other charts, but okay. So here I'm starting, and you see I have the value study next to it. And this is one where I just put a wash of transparent oxide red on, and now I'm wiping it out with paper towel, like where the highlights are. And then I go in with transparent oxide red, and I'm brushing, just using a brush and my fingernail and paper towels, just trying to get it to look like the values are all correct. So that was very fast, but seriously, the grid really helps me draw it because I know where the placement is. So like I said earlier, if you're doing from a photograph, you can just draw any kind of grid on your photo and that same grid on your canvas. And it just makes it a lot easier to draw. So that was just the underpainting. And I did that in super fast speed because I didn't think you needed to watch me suffer through erasing. So you can erase with your paper towel if you don't like something, and then you can draw it back in. So I pretty much always do some kind of underpainting like this. And then if you stand back and squint and it looks just like you want it to look, then you know that you're ready to start painting. But I wouldn't start putting color in until you have the drawing correct, because this is your roadmap. This is your second roadmap. Your value study was your first one. So it's really important to get this part right. And then here I have my palette up there. So I'm going to do the sky first. And that is permanent cyan. And I don't usually just use that as my straight color. I always add a little bit of ultramarine to it. So I can put it down there and just see, how it looks. And then from that same color, I just add ultramarine to it. I'm trying to make it darker. I even put a little bit of the green in it and a little bit of the magenta, just to make it a little darker at the top. And I used to, but I don't typically do the whole sky with a knife because I started finding it distracting with too much thick paint. I mean, you can. So then I just, if it has pretty much sky in it, I drag the brush down. So I'll show you that in a bit. But what it does is it brings your eye down into the subject. So I'm careful, trying to be a little bit careful not to get paint on this, like the steeple there where I know that I'm going to put a lighter color on. And then I mix up some light color, add a little bit of lemon yellow to it as it gets down to the horizon, because lemon is a cool yellow, and cool colors go in the distance more, and so do blue colors. So and when you're outside, you always see that the sky is lighter at the bottom, but it's also a little bit cooler with lemon yellow or sometimes orange. So I'm just kind of getting, and I have this in at twice the speed because I didn't think you needed to watch me do all of that. I don't want you all to fall asleep. And if you have any questions at all while I'm doing this, just ask me. So, and I try to make the blue a little bit into the color that it's going to be, especially where the trees are, so that I can go over it with the trees and I don't have a gap in there. So now I'm just dragging some of the color down there. I just wanted to get some more dark in the top. And then I go back with a knife and kind of blend it and bring it down. It was one of those beautiful blue skies. So this time I decided to keep it like that. And then I scrape all the blue to the side so that later when I, make a mistake or something, I'll have extra blue already mixed. And one thing I want to say too, I'm going to stop this for a second. I thought I was. When you mix green, I've had a lot of students that do this, is they use the Viridian because it makes perfect sense. It's green, it's Viridian, it's a green color. I never, ever, ever use that to make my greens because it's such a harsh, like almost like a fake green. I use the reason that's on my palette is to help make darks dark. Or like if I have a red that I want to dull down, that's the opposite. On the color wheel, I'll use that Viridian, but I don't ever use it to mix green. So what I'm using here and what I always start with, and then I adjust it later, is I start with ultramarine and yellow ochre because it doesn't make a brassy, tacky green. It makes a more subtle green. So there is what I mixed ultramarine with yellow ochre. And then I'll take some of it and make it a little bit warmer by adding I use some cadmium yellow deep and a little bit of lemon. Now I'm adding more lemon. So you see the two different greens there, the dark and the lighter one. Oh, there I used the scraper. So that's that Barbati scraper. And what I used it for is I had too much thick paint of blue where I want that lighter colored tree to go. So instead of fighting with the blue, I just scraped it off. So there I'm mixing like a cooler, I don't know, you can see the picture at the top of the left of my screen. It's like that cooler, lighter tree back there. So to make that color, I added some white and some lemon. And see how light that looks on the palette? But when you put it up there, it doesn't really look all that light. So I kept adding white to it to make it a little bit lighter and a little cooler because it is far away, and a little orange, which actually warmed it up a little bit. So there, if I put it on thick with a knife where the light hits it, besides the fact that it's lighter, the thick paint draws your eye there too. And it's bringing your eye down this way. Because the sun is coming from up the top right. So the top left of that tree will be lighter than the bottom part of it. So then I'm just using a brush here to put the darks in. So I didn't think they needed to be thick. And I emailed you the picture that I'm painting from so you could look at it. I don't know if you had time to print it out or not, but you can kind of see better what I'm doing. And here I use that thing because there's a mountain back there that I didn't notice. So I scraped out the sky blue so I can put that in. So here for that mountain, I took some green, because it is a green mountain, and added some sky blue and some white to it to make it like a very pale kind of bluish green. So the blue creates distance, and a little bit of the magenta makes it a little more purple. So very simply, I just put in that up there. It's kind of like a distant mountain. And I noticed it still wasn't light enough, so I added a little white to it. So if you have a lot of times when I do a demo, I don't even look closely at the photograph because I don't want to see all those details. It's all about the church, the front of the church, the door, and the light. So whatever's back there isn't even that important. So here I'm just putting in that pine tree. And it is kind of thick there, but it didn't bother me at the time. So I added some ultramarine to make it a little darker down underneath where there's no light. And sometimes I'll let little pieces of that transparent oxide red, like the whole painting doesn't have to be covered up. So sometimes if a little pieces of that transparent oxide red shine through, it's okay because it holds the piece together. And here I'm just putting, by putting that dark around the building. It'll help the building pop out. So I like to do all the darks first if I can, especially, well, the background darks, not the foreground. So if anybody has any questions as this is going along, just ask,
I have a question, Michelle. Like when you put in the light part of the tree, do you, or like the mountain, do you scrape away any blue before you do that, or do you just go right over it?
Well, that's what I did with that bar body thing. I scraped off there and I scraped off there a little bit so the blue wouldn't get in the way.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. And then I'm just adding some lights because even though that's a dark pine tree, it still has some lights in it, but they're not warm like these lights. They're more cool because that's, you know, how the pine trees are more of a evergreen color. And, you know, I don't know if you're all knife painters or not, but sometimes it's just easier to get a light on there than a brush. It just kind of mushes in. And like over here, I'm not really being fussy at all on the left about that tree because it's not important. What's important about that tree is it helps keep your eye in the canvas, because if that tree wasn't there, the blue would just make your eye go off the canvas. So compositionally, this keeps you inside the picture plane. And if, you know, if something doesn't look right, what's great about a knife is you can just scrape it off and put it back. And a lot of times, like if I mess something up later on, I'll show you how to steal some of this dark paint for a spot over here, because when it's kind of like having a palette on your canvas when you have thick paint also. You don't have to mix it all again. You can just steal it from somewhere else.
Michelle, when you're doing the tree and you have the one side that's the dark and then you're putting the light on the other side, do you try to intersect those two in the middle where it would be not light, not shadow?
Well, on this one, you can't, on the left here, you can't really see that much of it, but over here, I kind of blended it a little bit on this tree on the right. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So you can make a middle range by just scraping a little from your light side and your dark side and kind of get the middle of the tree.
Yeah, or you can take the two colors that you have, you know, on your palette, and you could add one in the middle that's maybe a little bit warmer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so, you know, I have most of the green. It's
the Adobe
oh, so here I'm letting myself talk.
really a color. So start with some orange, a little bit of green. That's crazy.
Okay, the reason I'm letting myself talk is because sometimes when I demo my thoughts, I've learned how to make my thoughts come out of my mouth. So you'll see my indecision in mixing this color because it's really hard. So I don't talk throughout the whole thing, but this part, and I hope you can hear me better, and I hope I don't sound too whiny. But as I was listening to it, I was like, oh, I can't even remember what I was thinking. So I'm letting myself talk here.
Lots of white.
And I was playing music, so that's what you hear.
So I'm mixing the colors for that and that, and then I'll adjust it as I go. So I should make sure I have enough. More ochre, more orange, more pink because it's very pinkish. And a lot of times, I really have no idea. It's gonna be right or not. I might just put some down there to see. So it has to be lighter, pinker. So And if I make it too light, I'll just keep adding more color. So that's light. A little bit magenta. It looks too light there, but if I put it back here, it's pretty close because it's also in the sun, so might be okay as a starting point. And then back here, it's a little more orange. So I'll take some of that orange. And a little more pink. Doesn't look much different, but let's see. Sometimes I put it actually on the paper. It's actually pretty good color for back here. And then there's the shadow there too. Well, one thing I like to do with the knife too is put some color in there that's not mixed real well. And oops, drag it across there. It just gives it some variety. And underneath the shadow part here, it's a lot darker. And here it's a lot lighter. So for the darker part, I'm going to add a little green. Alizarin. A little bit of blue too, or maybe green. We'll make it more purple, which is fine, like that. So then I'll just clean my brush off.
And one thing I want to add too is that Viridian and alizarin make a really nice purple. Like you wouldn't think green and dark red would make a nice purple, but it makes like a subtle purple rather than a garishy kind of purple. So that's kind of what I was doing there for the shadow.
See if that is dark. Yeah, it could be a little bit darker, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I think it should be a little darker. So I'll put more green in it. Maybe a little orange too. So that's the shadow. And there's two shadows here, one that's darker, and then there's one that's lighter. There's actually a little crack there. So with the crack, I'll make it. I could use my knife for this, so it's right there. Gotta put the windows in probably last. There's also, yeah, okay. And then the light part and the light shadow. So the shadow is lighter. And it's also more orange.
So see how I mixed that initial like pile of adobe and then I made it darker and warmer. And then I, took that and made it darker and cooler. So by using the same original like pot or pile of color, it's all belongs to the same family.
I'm not sure if this is going to be light enough, so I put it down there. But see, now I also hold my hand here, and I could hold it against here. Just for that light shadow. And put some of that lightish over here too, just to break it up a little bit. and then this light part is very washed out. It's gonna be kind of the same color as this and this, but that's a little cooler because it's farther away. So if I take, well, let's see, I'm gonna do this first, I guess. So I'm just gonna put some down here and see how this looks. And you can use a brush here. One thing I like to do also is from here to here, if you look on the photograph, I don't know if it's because it makes a turn, but it's darker here and it's lighter there. So this is the darker color. I'm not worrying about the windows yet. Darker color. This is the lighter color. It's a little bit dark here. And this is lighter. So I'll take this color, lighter, drag it over. And see, I have like a bead of paint here. It's kind of thick on that side. So I like to steady my hand. Oops. That. I had a cross. Didn't have enough paint to do it again. Couple times. Still think it could get lighter. One thing I want to do before I do that is this. Well, okay. So I'm gonna put a little more light in that and some yellow. To make
One thing I want to add is that this paint on here is very thick. So this is why this is working when I add the light to it. If it wasn't thick, it would just kind of drag across and it wouldn't make the cool effect that it does. But because all of this paint on the front of the building is very thick.
make it a little more distance and a little bit of red. Okay, so that's a lot lighter than that. But because I'm putting it on top of thick paint, it should work. So let's see. There, I like that. It gives it variety and it also gives it a distance. I'll do one more.
And one other thing I want to add is I have a really light touch with my knife. Like when I laid that lighter color on and dragged it across, I wasn't even touching the canvas. I was skimming it across the thick paint. So that makes a big difference because and the way that your knife is held, like I didn't hold it at a sharp angle. It was almost flat against the canvas. So it's a really kind of like if you were icing a cake and you didn't want to make it too lumpy, like this really soft, light touch across there.
I like that. And then we use that same color over here. It's a brush. Too light, so I'll add some of this to it. That's I can go this green I have down here. You can steal some of this green and put it back because the roof is gonna come. Okay, so now we got most of the adobe except this right. I'm gonna use the lighter colors. that I have here. Because this is a little closer. A lot more white. Some orange. I'll just put some there and see how it looks. That's- So you don't know until you put it down. So let's put some down, see what happens. I think this needs to be darker. And this is pretty good actually. Could be even whiter. Or more yellow as it goes by. A little bit of orange. Adobe color is really difficult. It also comes out a little bit.
And one other thing I want to add is even though that building, it's not a huge building, it's warmer in the front and cooler as it goes back. So you don't really see it on the photograph, but I know it. So if I exaggerate that a little bit, it helps create a little bit of distance.
I really want it to look sunlit, so that's why I'm gonna add more yellow, white, a little bit of orange. Just go over it again. And to make it look more lit, I'm gonna put some more dark over here. So I think if I take that, add a little bit of blue to it. Remember, we want it to look really sunlit. So the contrast is what's gonna make it look sunlit. So that looks pretty dark on there. I think it might be all right. A little bit of blue too.
And I just want to add, like, when you look at that pile of color and you look at the building, you think, yeah, I'm going to ruin it. But it's the same thing. I'm going to put it a really light touch and blend it across there. And I never really know if it's going to work or not till I do it, you know. So it's, but if it doesn't work, I just go over it. So you have to be like really bold with your paint. And it's the mistakes and the messing up and the going over that makes it look impressionistic. I just read an article about John Singer Sargent, and it said that he worked meticulously to make his paintings look fresh and loose. Like he would scrape off and go over it a million times. And in the end, it looked like a super loose painting. But we don't get to see what he went through to get there. And that's kind of why I slowed this down so you can think of, you can hear my creative thinking process. Like this is how I talk to myself when I paint too.
Michele, would you, it looks so sunlit, actually before you applied the paint, would you ever scrape down to the underpainting to get some of that sunlight?
Well, that's a good question because a lot of times like the blank canvas looked the right color because it's the thin underpainting. And I've probably done that already because I'd rather have the lights be thicker. I just spend a lot of time mixing until I get that light color that I like. Like right over here and here, like that's a really nice color. In fact, when this was all done, I was thinking it could be a little warmer. So what I could do when it's dry, it's not dry yet, I could glaze over that in like a transparent, yellow oxide or something over that, and it would look a little more yellow. And I might do that later when it dries.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So So then the underneath thing, well, yeah. I'll do the shadow first and then the white.
But see how the front of this building, it has like all these different colors, and that's what I like about palette knife and thick painting. If it was all just super even, like a paint by number, it would be a lot more boring in my mind anyway. Okay, so I think I turned off the sound. So now I'm working on the shadow underneath here, because here it's white and it's a blue shadow, and then here it's the darker of the adobe, which normally I think I would have done that dark first. I don't know why I did it this way, but now I'm gonna try to put that dark shadow in there. And I think after I finish the shadow, it's 11:30, so I thought we could take a little 5-minute break if you guys want to go to the bathroom or go get a drink or something. So I'm just in like a couple minutes, I'll stop it. So I used that same base color that I had been using and added some alizarin and some green to it. And I'm using a brush for that because I know that if I tried to use a knife, I could easily mess it up. So a lot of people say, oh, you don't use the whole knife. No, I use both. I use whatever works. And there I just dragged that same dark lightly across the thick paint, very lightly. Otherwise it would like kind of mush around, but I did it pretty lightly. And I was having a problem with that corner there. And I exaggerated that whole shadow and made it a little bigger just because I wanted to. In the photo, it doesn't come down that long, but I kind of liked it. And I'll go back and clean this up also at some point. But now I'm mixing the bluish color that goes underneath here. And because it's white, and you can even see on the picture, it looks like a bluish, purplish. So I mixed it to purple, and then I tried to make it more blue, and I'm going to use a brush on that as well. And that worked out pretty well the first time. I like it. And I just went back and tried to straighten it out a little bit. Because I didn't do this roof yet, so I'm not worried too much about that. And I put a little bit of blue over there, even though it's not really in the photograph, it seemed like it could use it. And then I'll put the white on top of it. And the good thing about using a lot of paint is I can go back and there's more there. Because I know that you all know, I'm sure the most frustrating thing is when you get a color right and then it's gone and you have to mix it again. So there I had saved the light color so I could go back and fix that up there. So I cleaned my palette there and saved it at the bottom in case I need that paint again. And now I'm mixing the very white where the sun is hitting that white part of the top. So when you add something like the magenta to the white, the reason I put those little dots there is you have to be really careful because that magenta will take over everything and make it pink. And also, did you see how I'll show you again, but I put really thick, I wiped my knife off and then I put really thick paint on. Let's see if I can show that again. So this is where I was saying that I put some lemon yellow in it and a little bit of, tiny bit of that magenta, tiny bit. So it's very subtle. And then I clean my knife off and see how I'm wiping. So it's just that much paint on it because it's about that size there. So even though it's a really big knife, right now it's a small knife, but it's flexible. The reason I don't like little knives, the little tiny ones they sell, is they just scrape the paint away because they're stiff. This one, because it's so long, it's very flexible. So I do this a lot in the next couple minutes where I just fill it up with white paint. Because like I said earlier, you want the white to be thick. So there I scraped it off. And then I just lay it carefully. I'm holding my hand with my other hand and I wipe it off, put more on, and wipe it off again because I want it to go in that little triangle. And I didn't get it completely, but then I can go from this side and get that angle in and then wipe it off again from the bottom. And then I evened it out and just put a little tiny bit right there. So it's thick there and I'll even that out later. And I guess we'll take a little break. Yeah, here we go. So I'm gonna put the rest of the roof on and the steeple. My steeple's a little crooked. And I knew that from the beginning, so I have to try to adjust it by putting the darks over a little bit to the right. So here I'm trying to put the problem with my demo is I'm working around my phone, which is right kind of in the front of my face. So when I bump it a lot, it's because I bumped it. But I always, if I have to do lines like that, and I know I can clean that one up. And there's a little bit of blue inside that steeple that I never added. So I just stole some of the blue from the sky and put it over there. And a little bit back there too. So I never really looked close at my photograph, but there's a bell in there, but I'm not painting that because I just kind of indicated it. And like if you mess up there with a clean knife, you can kind of scrape it off. And it's most important, something like that, is to get the angles correct. So when you see my hand go over to the left, I'm measuring the angle on the photograph, which is over to the left, to make sure I'm getting the right angle. And here, I had the wrong angle of the steeple, so I tried to correct it by going on top of it. And that was kind of too much paint, so I had to scrape it off, move it around a little bit. So, and I know it's hard to be bold if you're not used to a knife, and you could certainly use your brush on any of this. The second paint I demo in fast speed later, I use mostly a brush on just to show the difference. And there I can clean that up by dragging a clean brush along. So it's a lot of going back and forth till I got this. And then I put that angle on, which is really kind of too dark. And there's not a whole lot of room for the cross, but the cross is it's not like giant, but like if I was going to be super picky, I think that the steeple should be more squat, so there was more room for the cross, but oh well. So what I'm trying to get is like on the photograph, both sides of the steeple are pretty much the same value because they're both in the light. Oh, so here what I'm showing you is that the orange, I use a lot of orange, but if you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but way over here, you can see that little square. It's a semi-transparent color, so it disappears fast. So it feels like I'm constantly putting out more orange. But even though there really isn't an orange roof, it's kind of orange right here, but because I love orange, I'm going to make it look like it's an orange tin roof. That's why I'm showing you the orange tube. I'm going to put the orange across the top and the highlight across the top. So this is really something that I don't think I could do without a knife. If you use a really thin rigger, I guess you could. But here I mixed up some darks and I'm going to put them over here where this building is because I never really put that in there. And it's not important at all. So I'm mixing a bluish gray. So the reason I even put that building in is because it brings your eye over towards the painting. And I'll put a little highlight above it later. It's not an important thing, but I just wanted to show you how I think as far as composition when I'm doing a painting. So it's really nothing, but what's gonna kind of help the drawing is when I put that angle in. So I used the scraper. I'm gonna try to put posts in there, but it didn't work because it was dark underneath there. So then I'll go back with some lighter color. So it's a kind of lightish bluish white, and it's really barely even on the photograph, but it just kind of, more as a design element, brings your eye over towards the more the focal point. I'm just putting one thing there. It's just not an important part of the painting, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted to mention it. Now I'm going to go back to that roof. So there's lights across here, and then there's the orange. So first I'm doing the white, and I have pretty much paint. I'm holding my hands steady with the palette knife and sticking it in there. Once I have it where I want it to be, I press really hard at an angle to get that line. And that's really hard to do, and it takes a lot of practice. But it's just all about how much paint. You see how I have that, just a little tip I want to add. I missed it there. I probably could have left it go, but I was getting a little fussy. And if I mess that up, I can fix that up later. But anyway, so the light's hitting there. There I took a clean knife and just kind of, oh, I put dark underneath there. So there's a little bit of dark under the eave there as well. So same thing, I'm going to push hard and drag it, and that it's very subtle, but it's still there. Here comes the orange part. Yay. That's why I think I like going to Tuscany, and the orange roofs get me so excited. I know that sounds weird, but I wanted my studio to have an orange roof, but he told me that orange was more expensive and you won't see it anyway. So now I just have a silver roof. Okay, same thing. So I put the dark orange, dragged it all the way across there. It is pretty much at the same angle, this one and this one, which is unusual, but it made it a lot easier. Put a little bit up there. Now there's where the sunlight hits the top of the roof, I'm just putting a whitish with a little bit of orange in it. Now see how I hold my finger on the knife so that I can get it down there and then just drag it down. And that's really, like I said, really hard to do, but I always say little prayers to the painting angels that they let me put it on correctly. And a lot of times they hear me, but sometimes they don't, and I have to scrape it out. So I put the orange and then I put some white on top. And that's pretty much all it needs. You don't have to labor over stuff too much. I mean, it's all about leaving out a lot of stuff too. So now I think I'm getting to the cross. Yeah, so one thing you have to be really careful that it's vertical, and I think mine might be a little wonky. See, I wiped off the paint, so there's only so much on it. And then I put my hand up there. Sorry, that dinging is my mother trying to call me, but she doesn't remember how to text, so I can't text her that I can't talk right now. So I had to just keep hanging up on her. I feel so bad. So now see the angle of the cross. It's at an angle like that. And I measured it off the photograph. And it's not really that great, but I scraped off the little edge there. And I should have stopped, but then of course I had to try to put that over there, which now really makes it look crooked. But I'll go back and fix that. So like, that's part of the hardest thing I think about painting with thick paint is you have to be brave and know that you're going to make mistakes and also know that you can fix them. Because like I said earlier, it's the fixing up and the going over that make it look more impressionistic. If it was like a paint by number and you filled in all the colors perfectly, it would be really boring. It'd be perfect, but it would be boring. Okay, so now I am going to notice how I painted over all the windows, but there's only 3 and they're very obvious. One's in the middle and these 2 are just wonky. They don't even really make any sense where they are. So it's not that important. I didn't paint around them because then I wouldn't have the thick paint to go on top of. So I used some blue and some brown and see that little tiny dot on the end of my knife. I'm holding my hands really steady so they don't go like the windows aren't crooked. And then just like tap it down there, one tap. And it pretty much looks like a window. And I think I only add a little highlight to it later. So now the second window, same thing. A lot of paint, wipe it off, steady my hand really carefully. Oh, I thought that was too much paint. And then look at where it's supposed to be, about where it's supposed to be, and just put it there. And that's it. And that's what I like. I love painting windows. That's just like a weird thing of mine that I just really like painting windows. So then I'm going to do the door and a little bit of highlight on the, like where the pane is on the left. So I wipe off all the dirty paint and I can put the door. So I'm really studying where it is on there before I make sure the knife is vertical. And I could have just stopped right there, but then of course I had to fuss with it a little too much maybe, but there is some shadow. Like if you look at the photo, the middle of the door is not in bright light, just the trim around it is. So I put some blue there. And I kind of mixed in with the Adobe, but I don't mind that. So then I added some blue to go over it, and that might be too dark. So then I go over it again with some lighter blue. And that's why I go from top to bottom, because I don't have to worry about it coming down onto the grass because I didn't paint the grass yet. So now I'm taking some pure white. Just a little bit of, I don't know, for some reason, I started using orange a lot about 2 years ago. And it's a great way to warm up a color because it's so subtle. It doesn't turn it too yellow, but it also isn't pure white anymore. So I have a little bit on the edge of my knife over here. And if I hold my hand really carefully, that didn't work so good. So I'll clean that up. So it's a lot of back and forth and scraping and taking off. And so I definitely spent like too much time on that door, but it's funny how when you watch yourself in hindsight, it's like, okay, stop fussing. But at the time, I wanted to get it right. And there's some kind of post there I wanted to add just for variety. And then the sides of the window where you just see a little bit of light hitting there. and a little bit of light on the other one. And you know, it's not perfect, but it gives you an idea. And then I stop for that. So that part's pretty much finished, except for later I'll put a shadow in. Now the window above the door over here, I just mixed another dark color. It's not super dark, but it's just some blue and some green, maybe a little bit of brown. So I cleaned off exactly the size that I want the window to be. It took me a while to figure out what size it was going to be. That's why I keep going back and forth. And then wipe it off. That's why I wear gloves. So very carefully, I'm looking where it is on the photo. And I just kind of put it down and drag it across. And I think that's all I do for that, except put the white, a little bit of white on it. So I know I make it look simple and easy, but I've done this a million times. I probably couldn't even count how many windows I've put on buildings. So there I'm wiping it off. And I'm just dragging it down straight. But see how I got too much on it. So I clean my knife and just drag it across there. And that worked because it's thick paint. If I didn't have thick paint there, that wouldn't have worked. Now the little bit of the window ledge at the same angle that everything else is going at. And then the door is next. So, I mean, I could have fussed with that window and put like the panes and all kinds of stuff in, but I know that I just would have ruined it. So I think by leaving it simple like that, it's better because it's just a little painting. If I was doing a giant, like 30 by 40 of this, I'd probably indicate some of the window panes, but not for something so small. And then I just scraped off the paint with that tool. And I'm going to do the door. The sunlight really hits that edge of the door, and then it's dark next to it. And then the door itself has a lot of sunlight on it. And I did not make the door as wide as it really is. I didn't do that on purpose. It's just, you know, the way it happened, but I don't mind that it's like that. And this is one of the things that took me a long time to get used to. Nobody's going to take this painting to the church and go, hey, she doesn't have that door wide enough. Like nobody's going to know that except me and you. So as long as it works in the painting, that's all I care about. You know, if I was going to do this painting again, I'd probably make the door a little wider because it's a double door, but it's, yeah, it's good not to sweat small stuff. Now there's some lights there that are, I put the shadow on first. And then I'll just take a little tiny bit of light paint and put a dab one there and there. And it's funny because in real life, they stick out. So they look really dimensional, like the light is actually sticking out. So I mixed a little bit of dark color to make the shadow a little tiny bit bigger. Because it is the shadows that create the light. And then also it goes across the door. And that was just like a little touch, but I think that really, really helps the painting look like it's sunlit. So now there's there's a railing and some steps there. And I know it sounds like a kind of detail thing, but I am going to put that railing. But right now, I guess I'm doing the flower pot. So I put a little orange in there, even though you don't see it, I did put it there. But later on, I scrape out that one flower pot because I thought it looked kind of dumb, but you'll see that later. So now I'm just using my brush to kind of indicate where those steps are. The one side is in the shadow, and then this side is in the light. So just put it all dark there to start with. And if you're going to do this painting, you could even skip the steps because it's such a small minor part that you barely see. But if I was going to do the painting bigger, I would make the steps more detailed, but it's so small. I'm mixing up a little bit of light, and the steps look almost like Adobe color. I don't know if they are or not, but I put some highlights on the step. And then the right-hand side of the steps are very much sunlit. I think I go over this pretty many times till I make it look like steps. But putting those steps up higher makes the door look wider. Now here's the shadow of the railing. I did first. That way I can do the railing itself on top of the shadow. So same thing. The only reason that works is because there's a lot of thick paint underneath there. And I didn't spend much time at all on that, but it gives you the feeling. Might be a little too big, but I didn't notice that at the time. Okay. Now I'm just cleaning off the palette a little bit. So it's really ideal. Like I usually use a big glass palette, but for me to be able to show you what I was mixing, I have this is part of my Soltec easel, and I could just tape it up there. So here I'm doing the shadows of the green in the front. So I do the dark first. And I'm just putting a lot of paint down just to get started. Where all the dark things, more like a block in. And you can use your brush. I think the brush is better actually. I can put in all the darks, and that's just ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. I'm just kind of filling that up. And then I'm adding lemon and some more ultramarine to lighten it up. Excuse me, for the background. So that's a shadow from some trees that we can't see. Just putting some variety in it and going up and down with my knife. Now I'm adding a lot of lemon and some ultramarine blue for the lighter color and some white. I'm putting that there. That's the sun streaming across there. And I'll adjust this as I go, but I'm just kind of getting the starting point. So as everything else, like the green would get cooler as it goes in the distance, and I will adjust that later. But right now I'm just kind of filling in some of the color. And there I added some orange to that same light color as we're getting closer to warm it up. So orange is a warm color. And there I'm adding white to cool it off for the distant back there. And that might be too cool. It almost looks white, but I'll go over that. So the speed of this is also twice as fast. So I was painting half as fast. If that makes sense. And now I added more orange to warm it up as it gets closer to us. I really think I only used one brush in this painting. I think it's a 2 filbert. So it's long. And I never really, it's a new brush and I like it. So I've been using it a lot. So this is all just a starting point. I'm just kind of trying to get a lot of paint down there and then I'll move it around and adjust it. And these, the sunspots that go through, I'm just using my finger to soften them a little bit because they're not super hard edged in real life. Dappled sunlight is really not my forte. So kind of learning that as well. So I added more yellow ochre there to my palette. And just kind of adding, there's like a sidewalk that goes back and I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I just put a little kind of highlight. It also brings your eye over there. And then I'm right there too, except that's a little too much. Sometimes you don't want thick paint. Like if it's too thick, it draws your eye and it's more distracting. I mixed up a really dark color because I wanted there's like these crosses just in the middle of the yard. I don't know, but I'll tell you, the churches out here in Santa Fe are very interesting. I'm not sure why there's crosses right in the yard, but there's a couple of them. And I just thought it kind of added some flavor to it. And there's another cross back farther. I don't know. It almost looks like it's a graveyard right in the yard of the church. Now here I want to make a cooler green. So I added some blue and white to the green. See how it's so much cooler right there and back there? So that gives it some distance rather than have it all be that same green shadow color. So you can kind of see it. Oh, now here I'm going to show you a trick I learned from CW Monday. You take a Kleenex, they have to be Kleenex, and pull them apart so it's just 2-ply. And then you kind of make a tent in the middle and shake it so it has these legs. And then it's kind of, I thought the foreground was a little distracting with thick paint. So if I very lightly rub over it, you can barely see that it did anything, but it took the tall points of the paint away and softened it, mostly so it doesn't distract you from looking at the church. And then I'm showing you how I sign the painting, which I signed it prematurely, but I take a ballpoint pen and scratch it in. And then I have to wipe the pen off a little bit to scrape it again. Then after the B, I wipe it off again. And if your painting is wet and it was light underneath, you can sign it. And I just want to show you that because it's so much easier than trying to sign a painting with a brush. But even though I signed it, I decided that I wanted to add a flower pot there because I thought it needed something. And these are just, this is all just intuitively what I was thinking when I was painting it. I didn't plan from the beginning if I was going to put those flower pots there, but I decided it needed some color if that's my focal point. So I put some red flowers in there, and then I took that one out. I might have missed recording, putting those two over in the left, but then I took the one out. And I put some green back there. I guess the sun with it, a little bit of that lawn back there. And same as here, I wanted a little sun spot to bring your eye to that flower pot. So there is the final painting. And here's like close up, just showing you a little bit of the texture that's in there. And here you can see some of that transparent oxide red underpainting, but that doesn't bother me. And there it is in black and white. So you can see that the values, it looks sunlit even in black and white. And I think at one point I must have put this line across here. And it's a shadow from something, but I don't even really know what, but I liked it because it also brings your eye over. Okay, that was demo number 2. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, that was demo number 1. We're going to start 2. So for this one, it's the snowy adobe, and I do it in fast time because doing it the same way I did this one, except I used a brush and it's kind of just done speeded up. So we could fit it in. It's kind of a bonus because I wanted to show you how I paint snow. So there's the photograph, which was very dramatic and I loved it. I didn't put trash cans in, therefore I didn't put trash can shadow in, if that's what that even is. And I decided to take artistic license and put a teal colored door there because that's my second favorite color. So there's the value study. And then here's the underpainting. Same thing. I put the wash down and then wiped it out with a paper towel and did basically transparent oxide red underpainting. So there's the underpainting. And so when you do your underpainting, just stop and look at it. And if everything looks all right, then continue. And if it doesn't look all right, then wipe it out and fix it and paint it again until you get to that point. Because once you have this and you like it, you have a way better chance of having a good painting. So here again, I used pretty much the same blues. I used my brush. Sorry, I guess the camera was trying to focus on my hand. Oh, so that paper towel, what that was, is especially if you're using paint with Gamsol, if this is too wet, it's gonna blend into your blue, which you don't want. So I had studied with Richard Schmidt a really, really long time ago. And what he did was he took a paper towel after he did his underpainting and just laid it on top to soak up any extra Gamsol. And the reason I did it is because I knew this was still wet because I started like right away with the blue. So Gamsol doesn't dry as fast as water. So if you're using traditional oils, you might want to do that. So then I just continued and put the blue sky on. And this photograph has a little bit of clouds in it. So I tried to, they're very subtle and I didn't want them to distract from the snow on the trees, but I made it lighter there, which was just a little bit of white and lemon. So those were kind of some of the clouds, but they're not important because there's trees and snow and everything else there. But I generally try to keep the corners of the painting darker. So see how I have a darker blue there and there. That keeps your eye inside the canvas. So now I'm mixing a adobe color here. This one's very much in the shade. So it started with orange and green, and I think it's some yellow ochre and some blue, because that's the shadow part. So I put in all the shadow parts and then I adjust them as I go. This This was like a wooden door. And I put the shadows on right away. And the shadow of the door. Get more orange out. There's a little bit. So what's happening over here on the right? These are things you have to pay attention to on the photograph. If you have your photograph, the snow, the brightly lit snow here is reflecting into the adobe. So it's lighter, but it's more of a cool light. So those are the subtle little things that makes things look more sunlit. And the adobe that's far away back there in the shadow is cooler than the front part of it. And here I just mixed up what I thought would be a nice light color. And that's the kind of things you have to just mix it and put it on there. And if you don't like it, adjust it. So I added more red to it. And I go back and forth a bunch of times with the color on that sunlit part. And this wall in the back would be a little cooler because it's farther away. So I put some blue in it there. And it's all super subtle stuff, but it all helps make it look sunlit. That's the edge of the wall there. That's the shadow. I just added more of like a purplish color into the adobe. And there's a shadow there. That was like a tree shadow on the wall. And here, so there'll be snow there, but the tree shadow hits the snow. So I made it a little bluer, which I think I adjust that later too, but I'm just trying to tell you what I was thinking as I went along. Because if I squint at this already, it looks sunlit. And that's the shadow of the snow in more of a purple color. So generally when I say a purple color, I made it with alizarin and viridian and some white. And sometimes I'll add blue to it if I want it to go more in the blue direction. So that's that same purple color, the shadow part of the snow that's on the top of the wall. And then I cleaned it up a little bit with the adobe color. And there's the shadow on the snow from the wall. And I used the light in the foreground right away. Now I'm putting a little bit of green because we had our first snow on like November and all the leaves were still on the trees. So that's kind of unusual. But that's why there's still some green on and all this snow. The title of the painting is November Snow because I think for here it's very early. I mean, I've only lived here 4 years, but we never had snow this early. So now I'm putting some of the dark greens down there. And I'm just kind of squinting at the photograph to break it up. I'm not trying to get all the details. And this tree had some leaves on, but most of them were gone, but they were a warmer color. So I added some orange into that. And then I'll put the branches and the snow on last, but I want to put the darks in first. And there's some branches that hung down over that wall. And the sunlight was hitting the edge. So the sun's coming from the right. So I'm just putting some lighter yellow in those tops of those trees. Okay, now I'm mixing a darker green. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Actually, I have to watch. Oh, I'm doing the door. Okay, so I have to stop this for a minute. That tube of paint I just showed you is called emerald green. You can see it over here. And I just discovered that's a cobra color. And it's really good for making teal. And it's also really good for making sage colors if you add things to it for like the sage color brush. So anyway, that is going to be my door, but I started out with the emerald green and I'm mixing it down here. And then I add some of the blue to it, the primary cyan. That's what color I painted my studio door too. I love that teal color. So I just put it down there. I go over this door like way too many times, but I'm trying to get the arch of it. So I could have left the door brown like it was, but I wanted to use that color. So there's a couple places where I messed it up, but I can clean that up. So now I'm making a darker color using just pure emerald green and the primary cyan. I'm trying to get the arch in there. So it was a lot of back and forth, as you can see. But that's what you got to do. And I just keep at it until I like it. If you use a brush, you probably could just put one stroke down and be done with it. But I wanted the paint to be thicker there because that's my focal point. And then I took the brush. I'm trying to mix like a dark adobe color to go on that edge because that isn't green. That should be adobe. But you don't really see it because it's so much in shadow, but just a hint of the orange I wanted in there. Oh, and then I decided to put the cracks on the doors, and then I decided that was dumb. It doesn't look good. Looks like jail bars. So then I went back over it again. Now I'm putting these doors. These are actually like garage doors. And I made it too dark, but then I go back and lighten it. And you can see a little bit of sky through it. That's why I put that. It actually wouldn't be sky, it would be adobe. It's like a crack above the door. And then I wanted to put some variety to the adobe colors. So I made that a little more purple in the shade. And this front one I made lighter, more greenish. Not for any particular reason, except that I wanted variety. And I wanted the shadows to be a little bit lighter and bluer. And there's that shadow on the door. And the shadows on the adobe and across the door from the tree that's not painted yet. There's the snow. And I just used of course I don't, sorry, I have the music on. I didn't realize that. So this white color is, it's not pure white. I never use pure white in my paintings. So I added a little lemon and a little orange to it just to warm it up. It is a little bit warm. And because that paint's really thick, I mean, the snow was really thick, so I thought it would be good to have the paint thick. And I ran out of white. I do use a lot of white, and I buy it in 150 milligram tube. There's a little shadow on that snow. And I had a really hard time with this here. Trying to get the thick snow and the shadow on there. So the sunlight hits a little bit back here. And then this is where the sunlight's really hitting there. So I wanted to put some shadows under. That snow was really thick, so it created a shadow underneath it. And I exaggerate that a little bit, but that's okay. Sorry about the music. I thought I muted this part. There's the shadow color of the snow, which is like a bluish color. So I'm just really putting it down simply because especially over here, it's not that important. It just is a element to bring your eye over. So then I put the snow in the trees. Oh, good, the music's off. So just a little dab on my knife, trying to make that thick part that comes out. And there's a little bit of sunlight hits there. A little bit there, which I'll fix later because it wouldn't be down that far. Yeah, when it snows here, you have to go out and take pictures really soon because the sun comes out and it's all gone. This snow lasted 2 days until it started. This kind of stuff on top of the adobes was the first to melt. So this video is only 11 minutes more. And then we'll have some questions and answers. So there, I really messed that up, but I know that I can scrape it off with a clean knife. So if I just drag it up there, I'll have to go over it with Adobe color, but that's why I try to save my paint at the bottom so I can clean it up if I mess up. So I was going to try to do this whole thing with a brush, but I guess I can't control myself. I needed it for the door, which I could have not. I could have used the brush. So there I did have to mix up a dark color to put a shadow underneath there. And there. And I like that blue shadow on the edge. So I'm always thinking about where the sun is. And there's a little bit of light up there. A little bit up there. Okay, so now I'm using my rigger and I mix some transparent oxide red with some blue and That's what I like the rigger for. I just kind of lay it down and twirl it around very lightly. So it has more of organic look rather than if I painstakingly had a little skinny brush that I was trying to draw it. I kind of let the brush do its own thing. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I really mess things up, but I just kind of twirl it around. And I have to keep dipping in the dark paint because I pick up some of the blues as I'm doing that in my brush. So I'm putting some orange in it too, just to warm it up for this tree because it's closer to us. And then back there, it's a little bit of a cooler color for the branches. So I added some blue to it. And some orange for that part that was sunlit. But these two trees were really kind of crazy. The trunks going every which way. So here I'm putting like where the sun is hitting the snow. A little bit of it's laying on the branches. You have to be careful because the knife is picking up the darks. So I have to keep wiping it off with paper towel. So now I'm mixing up more of a purple color for the shadow of the snow. And the sun's not hitting it. But here's a design element. I thought I'd have these lights dancing their way down to here, but it might be too polka dotty. I'm not sure. I'm mixing up more sunlit snow for over here. Even though this is really light at the edge of the canvas, it goes in an angle down that brings your eye down towards here. So I don't mind it. Plus there'll be some darks in there as well. No shadow under there. That's some bushes. So I'm just putting some dark greens in there. And I'm not fussing at all, just kind of laying it down and letting it go. And there's the snow on those branches that are hanging down. And then some purple shadow color. Now I'm mixing up a shadow snow color for the foreground. So I used ultramarine and a little bit of magenta. I'm just basically trying to get a lot of snow in there. But I know that if you look closely at the photograph, there's this reflected light here that reflects into the snow. So the snow's warmer right there. So I want to make sure I add that because that's all about like the reflected light and the lights and shadows is a big part of the making the painting successful. So I'm making this very orange because it's reflecting from that Adobe color. And I can see it in the photograph, but I'm exaggerating it maybe a little tiny bit. And then I added ultramarine to the blue, kind of trying to make it look like footsteps or something that draws your eye to the door. And that's very kind of too much blue, but I go over it later. But it's just another element to bring your eye over towards this way. So we're almost finished. 3 more minutes. And sometimes, like if you're an artist that gets too fussy, give yourself a timer. Like even though we're not plein air painting, when we do a studio painting, I'll say to myself like, oh, I can't eat lunch until I finish this painting. So then it makes me paint faster because I'm really hungry. So you can like trick yourself little ways to paint faster. And, you know, if you mess it up, then you can go back. You can eat lunch and come back and look at it and go, oh, I know exactly what this means. I was just putting a couple of lights, but they probably wouldn't be quite that light, but and a lot of snow paintings that I see that I like, I really like the strong ultramarine colors. So I will add some of that before I'm finished. Oh, I guess I went to put a doorknob on there. Those people couldn't get in their door. So I wasn't happy with that color. I went back over it again. And I kind of messed up the arch, but I can fix that too. If I take a really clean knife, I can just kind of scrape it off. And there was, I just wanted to break up that big dark area. And some more shadows. Okay, now here comes the ultramarine blue. So I was really just mixing straight ultramarine with a little bit of light, but kind of to make it darker in the foreground, which also helps draw your eye back because you don't get drawn off the edge with the lights. Okay, so that's the painting. And then here's some more close-ups. You can see kind of some of the brush strokes. And that's it. So there's a list of my workshops. I'm really painting a lot next year. 4 in Florida. Then I come back and teach in Santa Fe. Then I'm teaching in France, but that one's sold out. And then I'm doing an April one in Santa Fe. The April ones are going to always be indoors in my studio. And then the September ones are always going to be plein air. And you can see them all in my workshop, the recorded classes and the mentorships. And that's it. So I'm going to go back to not sharing. So we have 20 more minutes for questions and things. I thought I had an end thing here, but I guess I didn't. Oh, there you go. Thank you. The end. Okay. Stop share. Now you can all unmute yourselves. Why did that not stop?
While everybody else is unmuting, I have a question about that emerald green.
Okay.
I haven't picked one of those tubes up yet. When you put that up on the screen, on my screen, it looked almost like a viridian. Matter of fact, that's what I thought it was first. Is it close to a viridian or?
I don't know. It's kind of a color unto itself, I think. I mean, it's, I guess it could kind of look like a light meridian, but Cobra just came out with it. So of course I had to have it and I like it. It just seemed really perfect for sage colored greens, which we have a lot of. And for this painting, it's the first time I used it to make a teal, and it really worked, but not by itself. I had to add that primary cyan.
Well, Michele, thank you. I swear, watching you paint in this video is like watching Michael Tilson Thompson. Thomas.
Oh. Well, thank
It's
you. I
exquisite.
mean, I know I make it look easy, but it's just a lot of practice. I mean, I've been painting obsessively for a long time. So, and same as the knife. I don't know if any of you really want to use a knife or not, but you have to hold it really lightly, like it's a piece of china, and just, you know, it's when people grab onto it and dig into the painting, then they scrape it off. And so that's kind of the trick with the knife, I think, is just holding it lightly. But
Well,
thank
it's
you.
just exquisite to watch your movement. It's seriously, it's like ballet or something. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you very much. And I would love to come to California to teach, but we'll see. You'll have to see if we can get something together.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah. All right.
My big aha moment was when you talked about how to use viridian. I mean, I've always hated viridian because I kept trying to mix greens with it.
Oh, yeah. You know, I know that I don't use Viridian to mix greens, but I forget that people think it's green. That's what I'm going to mix greens with. But no, I don't ever mix greens with it. And as soon as I'm teaching a class and I see people that have used it, you can tell it because it's kind of an acidy green. It's not a very nice green. But anyway, well, we are done a little bit early, but a couple people sent notes that they had to go, so that's okay. And the only thing I want to tell you is that I'm going to record. Well, this is all being recorded, and I'm going to put it on YouTube today sometime, and it might take a long time, but I'll get it to you either tomorrow or Monday, and I'll send you a link to it. It's not just automatically on YouTube. I have to send you the link, but I'll send you that. And if you have any other questions, just send me an email. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Michele.
All right. Well, thanks for all being here. I really appreciate you all. And thank you. And like I said, just text me if you have any questions, okay?
Thank you, Michele. That was absolutely wonderful.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure who said that because
Stacy.
but anyway, thank Stacy. Oh, thank you, Stacy. All right. Well, I guess I'll end this if no one else has any questions, and have a great day. It's beautiful out there where I am. Hopefully it is where you are too.